Vish, welcome to the Empower Podcast, man.
Thank you so much. Great to be on your show.
Excited. I'm excited. It's good. Hey, today's guest is Vish Ganti, President and COO of DER Security Corp, building the largest cybersecurity system in the world, right, Vish?
For energy assets, the most empowering system that runs our economy is basically energy.
Awesome. You've been pretty busy lately. You went to the Nvidia conference. Tell me a little bit about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, the Nvidia conference, it's GTC. It happens here in Silicon Valley every year. Heard Jensen speak. This year, it's all about physical AI, physical infrastructure, and how AI, which largely stayed in large language models before, now is making its way into physical world as well. Robotics, AI, automation, all those are topics. But data centers are front and center of it too, because we need a lot of compute and energy to win in this AI race. And those are hard problems.
Yeah, I recently saw your company in what is it? Magazine, PV magazine.
That's right. PV Magazine. Yeah, we wrote our CTO, Jay Johnson, put out an article. Go check it out. We'll give you a link to that. It really lays out the current threat landscape as it relates to renewable energy systems, inverters, batteries, which is approximately 90% of all new energy systems that are getting connected around the world. That's coming to attention and scrutiny right now. So that's what the article is about.
Just to give my audience some context, we're going to be speaking with Vish today. He's one of the biggest operators, builders, innovators in the space. You know, and a lot of people think about like dropping bombs, shooting missiles, attacking countries. There's a bigger war out there going on.
Cyber war.
What's your company doing exactly to protect us from this cyber war that basically when people think about solar, they kind of set it and forget it and they don't think about anything.
Yeah. Well, so I think we have to really take a step back and see our current geopolitical landscape we're in. We're in many conflicts right now. United States is engaged in many conflicts internationally. And there is a lot of asymmetrism built into that model because these countries cannot shoot stuff at the United States directly, but they will engage with us in an economic manner in cyber world because those are terrorist activities that could happen from outside of the United States. So what we look at is on the energy infrastructure side, which is largely critical assets, critical infrastructure. What type of attacks are happening around the world? How do we protect? How do we actually play offensive and defensive strategies when it comes to this energy infrastructure? My company specializes in intrusion detection, anomaly detection for energy assets, so battery storage, fuel cells, natural gas turbines. That's what we specialize in. And if you really look at where this equipment is going, it's in to power the AI, next industrial complex, or military microgrids. So these are vulnerable choke points that could be exploited in this asymmetric warfare.
So all these systems, these energy systems that we rely on, we think are efficient, it's also making us more vulnerable.
Yeah, there's two sides of the coin. They're definitely better for the environment. They're helping us in the energy transition, but it's also the dark side of it is a lot of it is using insecure communication interfaces and protocols. So we haven't really put a lot of emphasis on how do you secure that energy infrastructure because we were so busy deploying these cheap renewable energy assets across the grid. So it's a factor of attention, like what did we focus on versus what gaps we that left behind. And as we look at the future of the installations, we think it has to be secure by design, engineered for security, not an afterthought like we did with the past systems.
You bring up the geopolitical landscape with like Russia, China, Iran. We just invaded Venezuela. Like in a day of the life of yourself, when you witness an attack, what happens? Like, what happens if the grid would actually shut down? Like, let's say I live in California, you live in California. Let's say the grid shuts down for 24 hours, and then let's say it shuts down for 72 hours. Like, it's a big attack.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very grim landscape. It's not a pretty one just to even envision it, but there are signs of this that happened in the Spain incident in the Iberian Peninsula, where roughly the entire peninsula had a blackout. And we saw people's lives being taken away. There's like economic implications, but also medical services, emergency support services, everything starts falling apart. right? Like, but energy is required for every aspect of our sustenance and our business continuity. There is also examples where, when, especially with the area that we're focused on the data center energy space, we know that the AI infrastructure is being used to target our adversaries. So there's all the very reason for those guys to come at these systems. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty grim situation, because your traffic lights stop working, your metro transit, it impacts the general day-to-day people, but also, communication, emergency communications to people where they need that information the most. And what we've seen in the Russia-Ukraine conflict is the playbook is very clear. Every time there is a kinetic attack before missiles are fired, the natural course of action that these countries have demonstrated is to take down power infrastructure first and then carry out their kinetic attacks.
So, Vish, if we were to shut down, just for the layman people out there that have solar, understand it, there could be a lot of death potentially. Like
Yeah.
people, I'm thinking of like my grandparents right now that rely on
Power.
pacemakers and oxygen and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, and increasingly what we see is those type of what were called medical flag customers who have medical equipment. They need to have resiliency. They're putting batteries and other type of things to give you a little bit of coverage, solar and batteries, but that's like a very small percentage of the customers who even have access to those systems today. Now, on the contrary, we're talking about very large assets. It's not just solar in somebody's home. That's a trickle down effect. But what we saw in the Spain incident was one large generator basically going offline that led to a bunch of cascading failures across the systems. Roughly 20,000 systems disconnected from the grid due to the faults that got created. So it can manifest in so many different ways, but it could originate in a single large utility or a big power station or an inverter that, because of its tripping, causes voltage and frequency issues across the rest of the network. Because at the end of the day, this is a grid, it's all tied in.
Our grid is pretty old, but I think it's old, right?
It's been built over 100 years.
What are we doing like right now to protect the grid that's super freaking old, man?
So I think we've gotten, in full disclosure, we've gotten really good at securing coal plants and very large traditional generators, nuclear, etc. Where we see the biggest gap is this new type of assets, batteries, inverters, fuel cells. These are not being located under the premise where the utility monitored. They're not at a substation. They're in somebody's home or a building. They're spread out virtually. And there's tons of tiny devices too. So there is a huge attack surface that the utility today does not monitor, right?
Yeah.
And then there is the old equipment that they're very good at monitoring. They've spent millions of dollars trying to secure the old traditional infrastructure. When we look at the new infrastructure, that's where all the gaps reside.
Let me ask you this. When you see an attack coming, walk me through, like, how are you notified?
Yeah, so we specialize in what's called cyber physical threat detection. So we look at the physical aspects of the system. Is it behaving as it's supposed to behave, or is it exhibiting any abnormal conditions? And those could happen for a variety of reasons. It could be an attacker trying to maliciously send signals, changing firmware, or even adjusting set points without even coming into the home, right? It could be done through an API. What our solution does, it monitors the actual behavioral patterns and determines whether it's doing its thing. First thing is we detect, second thing is we alert, and third thing is we remediate. So we've got the capabilities to act on machine speeds, basically almost near real time, to reset the settings to known good settings, so that even if there's a constant set point being written by a system which would cause a damage, we would reject that. The best analogy I give to folks is, think about you're driving on a freeway at 65, 75 miles per hour, and you try to instantaneously switch to a reverse gear. Your vehicle actually has protection built into it that looks at the physical state and saying, I'm going in this direction at 65, 75 miles per hour. There is no way in under condition that I should be accepting an instruction to go in put the reverse gear, because that's going to have catastrophic impact on the system.
So basically, your system, you can almost fix it like that, like pretty quick. You recognize it, you fix it, we're good.
Yeah, because we understand the physics, and then under physical operating conditions, we know what is actually allowed and what is damaging and what's not damaging. So that's how we're able to act. And so what does the vehicle do in my example? It's going to give you an alert that we're not going to allow you to switch from drive to reverse gear. It's going to give you an alert, but it's also going to reject at the same time. so that your vehicle doesn't get damaged.
Well, that's good, Vish, because it would suck to lose power, as a regular day person, but that's a minor problem, man. We would lose full control of society for a little bit, economics, everything. I mean, we'd be hemorrhaging money. Some of these corporations, people, the government, it would be a big economic setback.
Big economic step back, but also I think the physical impacts it will have on the society are more stark. So we're here as warriors to protect against those sort of nation threat actors, especially coming into our energy systems here in the United States and protecting our assets.
I think with everything going on in the world, I know we kind of touched on this before, but like there's a lot of people that they don't like us right now. They don't like America. They've never really liked this, but do you think these attacks are going to just like really start coming? Like when you say attacks, is it daily? Is it weekly?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've talked to utility folks, chief security officers. They say we get attacked 20 times a day, right? So there's always a notion of bad guys trying to get into our system. And let me also explain this to you slightly. It's not always that your intent is to create a complete outage. It is also to gain supremacy in positioning yourself and pre-positioning yourself. So the same way we actually send spies to other countries, right? There are
Right.
people who are in our energy systems, in our critical infrastructure, who sit around, lurk around for the right opportunity. Because as I said, spies don't want to get their cover blown. Same thing with these cyber threat groups. They don't want to get their cover blown. But when it hits the most and the hardest, that's when you actually deploy your stealth.
I have to believe, being one of the most powerful countries in the world, that we have some pretty good spies ourselves,
Yeah,
right? That we
absolutely.
have to be attacking just as much as they're attacking us.
In fact, that is something that the Trump administration just recently also announced, and then basically saying that we're also not just playing the defense, but we're also going to be on the offense, right?
I gotta believe with Trump, we're on a pretty extreme offense.
Yeah, I mean, there's things I cannot say on the show, but generally, I would agree with you that the perception of just being on the offense is not going to serve in the current environment. So it's also not just defense but also offense.
Vish, your job sounds very, very stressful. Like, what keeps you up at night, man? It seems stressful to me. I'm sure it's a lot of fun for you, but
Well, it is fun, but it's also very stressful in that there are things that happen outside of your control, right? There's global tidal waves and other forces that play into this. But what what keeps me up at night is how it manifests in our world, in the world we live in here in the United States, right? So that's terrifying. And the more we dig into it, the more we find.
yeah, man, I can only imagine.
And what happened in the current paradigm is AI has also changed the attack surface. And in fact, we've seen a lot more attacks being carried out fully by autonomous agents, so that they can carry out things in the most sophisticated way. What used to take a few months for somebody to engineer can now be engineered within a couple of weeks.
And those are all custom AI agents basically
Yeah.
attacking, or is it a little bit more than that?
Well, so you've heard about jailbroken phones, right?
Yeah,
Like people jailbreak phones. Well, have you heard about jailbreaking models?
I have, where they kind of do mass hallucinations and go crazy.
Or you remove the guardrails. Another way to do is to just remove the guardrails. I mean, the leading frontier AI model providers are doing so much to put guardrails around what their AIs will do. Like, for example, if somebody's sharing a private key or PII data, today's AI agents basically will restrict you and warn you and say, hey, this is now in public domain. Do not share keys and stuff like that. Imagine when those guardrails don't exist. Same AI without the guardrails. So that means all bets are on the table, all limits are off. So that changes the attack surface and the war scenario much more in an asymmetric way. Now you have agents that can carry out these attacks themselves and find zero-day vulnerabilities, code injection. And the thing is, where you apply that technology is also terrifying. If you apply on critical infrastructure, that means the effects are more profound and felt in our society.
What are you doing from an AI perspective to basically defend those crazy AI agents?
It feels a bit like a cat and mouse game, right? Doesn't it? We use AI for anomaly detection. So historically also I think AI, machine learning and AI has been used in routers and devices, networking gear for anomaly detection. At our company, we've trained a specific AI using digital twins. So we have like digital representation of physical devices from the physical AI infrastructure. And we train models in a playground environment so that we can actually know what are all the possible scenarios under which this system will exhibit a malicious behavior pattern. So we use AI extensively in the company to build our company and also train very sophisticated AI models for intrusion detection. That seems to be where the market is. In fact, I was at RSA, as I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast. The whole conversation about it at RSA conference was around how agents are being trained on the offensive side and the defensive side.
That's wild. And then you also went to that, what other conference you go to? It was the security conference, right?
That was the RSA conference. That was the one, this week.
What type of people are there? Is it all Fortune 500 companies? Is there other countries there too?
So like with every conference, you need buyers and sellers. In this conference, the star of the show is what's called the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer for a company. They are responsible for all the decisions around how to secure enterprises. Now, what meant in the past was secure your email, your websites, et cetera, right? Your IT stuff. But what about the building? What about the camera systems? What about other ancillary services that enable your business to function, the operational technology stuff? So that confluence of IT, OT convergence with AI and with infrastructure is what this conference was about. So it was largely CISOs. And on the vendor ecosystem, there's 100, 200 plus companies that build products in this space. And everyone talks about AI.
So it sounds like AI is going to be kind of the defense mechanism on this battlefield.
Yeah. And I equate that to like an antibiotic, right? What antibiotics were made of was from the original, basically, infections. So we created the antidotes that became an antibacterial, like the vaccines. So my point is AI for AI. It's not eye for eye, but it's AI for AI.
Vish, let's talk about a little bit. Tell me about your high school, college, and kind of how you got here. You're a very interesting person. I find you very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't land in cybersecurity just sort of like a awakening moment. I'll just give you a quick overview, right? So I'm an electrical engineer by trade. So I've done computer engineering, electrical embedded system, chip design. So I understand the actual electrical systems really well. During somewhere in my undergrad where I was studying my engineering, I also took ethical hacking courses. I've done computer networking just out of interest. Now, that kind of stayed in the back of my head. I never really used it for anything much other than a period of time where I learned, got myself Cisco certified for networking gear and Microsoft certified. That was a market then. Where I built most of my professional career in the US was around energy systems. So I've done clean energy, smart grid, demand flexibility, basically managing the grid in a more optimal way on the physical side. So during this phase of my career, I deployed a lot of distributed energy, these batteries, inverters, systems, both front of the meter, large scale assets, hundreds of megawatts to gigawatt scale, all the way to aggregating millions of small devices. So I've played that, the whole full spectrum of energy infrastructure being in the modern day being built. And of all of these companies, I realized that every time I took a problem and tried to solve it, security was not one that was front and center because we were so busy optimizing for the value or the economic use cases that security was always left to this afterthought. In my last two companies, I think I was much better that we had a CISO role or function in our company. So it was somebody's problem to actively pursue and solve. So some of the thoughts or experience that I gained was through talking to people in the industry who are security experts. And it became very clear that there is this divide between people who are operating and deploying systems and who's responsible for security. And that was basically the unique insight that, hey, I think given that we're installing gigawatts of scales of energy assets, there's got to be more bespoke solutions to go secure that. And you need domain expertise to do that. You cannot take a system that is being used for, let's say, securing hospitals or some other generic use case, deploying that for the energy because this system is so different. It's physics based.
Vish, you're an innovator, you're an entrepreneur. What are like 3 characteristics make up a good innovator entrepreneur?
One is grit, right?
Can't have enough grit, man.
I think there's always going to be high days and low days, and you just have to keep your head up and keep going, right? I think the most important thing is to have a North Star. You need to know where you want to go and where the company needs to go. Now, on a day to day basis, we might navigate through various challenges and outcomes, but all those are short term. Like, if you're taking a detour from one direction to another direction, your destination doesn't change. You just took a detour to getting there.
Good advice, man. That's good
Right. So
stuff.
I think I'm more focused on the North Star in the long term as much as I'm on taking those detours to getting there faster than anybody else. And third is to work with the customers. They'll tell you often what are the challenges, how do they value your product, and what is the willingness to pay for your product, right? There's always the customer is your best guide. So I think those are the 3 things. And of course, VCs and investors come later, but the first as an entrepreneur is to not focus on the VCs and innovate investors, get the product market fit, get the market to say that this is a good problem to solve and it's a valuable problem to solve, and then go to the VCs and say, hey, I'm now ready to blitz scale this thing.
A lot of sense. But at the end of the day, your first answer, having grit, when you have those bad days, you got to just get up the next morning and try to be 1% better.
Yeah. And I think it's also moving the organization and people with you to that. It's not just your solo journey as an entrepreneur, right? There are people who are your early employees, early investors, early customers. They all need to follow that journey with you, but you should keep anchoring on the North Star because people might have different perspectives. They might start at a different point in their journey, but they should be anchored around where this industry is going and why this problem needs to be solved. And the fourth thing, I guess, in a bonus is to prove it to yourself before you sell it to others. I'm always about that. Like I've done it all my life. If I don't personally believe in something and I don't see the value in it, I'm not going to sell it because that runway is very short.
It sounds like it sounds like you have a lot of fun. You probably work with some amazing people and you probably make a lot of money. The company probably fun. And I think working with good people are really important.
Absolutely committed people, both. You have to find people who are experienced because in this world, like it feels like everybody can vibe code their way through an app, but that's one side of it. Speed is definitely key for your demos, but maturity and of the product, maturity of what you can do, deep rooted problems, they does take time. You cannot vibe code your way through that. Right. So you have to be really, really smart about where you can apply like an intern to go vibe code and build something very quickly, but also see what big Fortune 500 companies and mature organizations need to scale it and to deploy it in production. Because that gap between what you vibe code and where it's working in full cloth in production is a pretty large one for small companies to navigate.
I can see that. All right, last question. Most impactful piece of advice you were ever given?
I would say it's a lot to do with the overall narrative and the storytelling. You've got to be an extremely good storyteller, right? At the same time, you need to be very likable by everybody. People need to resonate with what you're saying. So it's your ability to articulate the problem in a very simplified way, but at the same time speak to the audience, know your audience, and win their hearts, and they'll believe in you. And I think what worked really well for me is I meet people at conferences, I meet in person, and have these dialogues and this conversation. I learn a ton from the experts. I don't know everything, but I figured out who to ask for help and where to navigate and find those detours.
That's true. You got to be able to have people believe in you, trust you, integrity. That's good stuff. Vish, where could people find information about you and your company?
Check out dersec.io, our website, and look for me on LinkedIn. We'll post my LinkedIn as well, so very approachable. We're always looking to find new talent and people with interesting experiences. They might have experienced certain things around blind spots in the energy space, or generally like, hey, I walked past my substation, I see this big giant boundary now. What is my utility doing about it? I'm happy to talk about what that means for their communities. What I recently realized Ty, is that community where you're located is very, very important. I'm fortunate to be in Silicon Valley, so I learn from the community around. So tap into those. And last bit, I think go have fun at hackathons, build stuff, break stuff. There's no shortcut to that. I've always used that to learn fast.
Awesome, man. Hey, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.